Hello everybody and welcome back to Planet Coaster. We are once again working on the Greenhorn project dive coaster. And this video is going to be a little different than the other ones because I already built everything I'm going to go over in this video. I felt like the time-lapse wasn't going to work for this time because I spent so much time figuring out what I wanted to do with these sections. And like I mentioned before, I'm still pretty new to Planet Coaster and I have no idea what I'm doing. So I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to build certain things and figuring out exactly what I wanted to do for the coaster. So some things got deleted, and instead of spending a lot of time going through time-lapsed footage of elements that did not make it and got deleted, or me spending a lot of time going through hours of footage to find the time-lapse footage from these parts that I kept, I'm just going to go through and kind of talk about what has changed since the last episode and go over some quick bits of information about these in-ground elements here and how I changed the coaster station. Honestly, I don't think they're really that interesting to watch built live, but still, it's a step going towards the next episode where we're going to be adding a lot more detailing and stuff like that. So I think one of the first things you can probably see right off the bat is I expanded on the coaster building a lot with this big pad down here, which I'll take off the roof in a second here and show you. But I really didn't like, as I was like working on everything else, I kept looking at this coaster station and I just never really liked it. Like in my head I wanted it to be a super simple, like just a square building with a cover over it and still look really nice. But since the dive coasters, the trains are short, they're technically 3 cars, I think, or 1 car, I don't know, they're really short though obviously, and wide. It makes for this really awkward shaped coaster station, because usually coaster stations are really long, and so I felt like this, and since it's elevated, it also didn't help because it had to be elevated to incorporate this kind of dive, this Immelman loop underneath the station. So it ended up having this one square. This looked really odd to me. It looked out of place, and I might have been able to decorate it a little more. It wouldn't have looked as much of an eyesore, but I really wanted to expand on the building, and for a while I was generally just wanting to incorporate the coaster building with the maintenance shed into one large building. So that's what I did here on the bottom. I'm going to take up the roof right now. It's a separate building, which helps me because I can just do this, whoop. So you can see on the inside it's still empty, but it serves 2 purposes. So the inside has been expanded underneath the coaster station where the queue entrance is, and that gives me a little more space to put in some switchbacks, because when I first built the building I thought it'd be really cool to run the queue through this first part of the building, and I really like the idea of having some switchbacks in there, but being only 3 blocks or 3 tiles wide, you know, a tile's still 4 meters, but it made it really hard to work in that confined area and have any meaningful amount of switchback queue line to hold guests. So by tearing down this wall and expanding it, I was able to push the queue out a couple blocks or a couple tiles, and that gave me enough space in here to have a good chunk of switchbacks, and then I'll probably have some TV monitors or something, some more decoration in here, which I'm going to do in another episode. And then the rest of this building is designed to be kind of like a gift shop, not necessarily for the coaster. I'm not going to be fully decorating it as a gift shop, but I am going to add in this back wall corner area a photo station. I don't know where I want to put a flashing light photo element somewhere on the ride, probably after this first drop. I haven't decided yet on where it will be, but I do want to put like a little kiosk desk with a attendant standing there and the TV monitors on the back that show the pictures of the ride. I thought that'd be really cool. Alright, so this next section here is just a quick little time-lapse spot of when I was working on the tunnel section. I just want to throw this in here because I feel like there's a couple tips that I could give for working on buildings like this, at least the way I build. I mentioned in the last video, I don't like relying on my visually to space out things, because I want to make sure everything's are perfectly spaced. So what you see in a second here is that once I build this central tunnel and I push all the terrain back, and in order to build underground better, I ended up digging out the terrain above as well. And then later on you'll see I use some terrain tools to manipulate the terrain back over the tunnel. You can see here what I'm using is another pillar, this one a 4-meter one on top, and then I also put 2-meter ones on bottom as reference points for the tunnel to make sure that the clearance is pretty much identical throughout. So then what I do is, instead of making a curved ceiling that could be kind of hard to set up, I did it with sections of angled ceiling. So connecting the spacing pillars between the various lengths. It makes it so, like I said, as the coaster is going through, the space that the coaster has around or inside the tunnel is pretty much even, top and bottom and side to side. That's why right here I'm making sure the tunnel is nice and centered around the coaster, and then I go through and start building or expanding out the ceiling. Just going one section at a time, grabbing a section, trying to get it to line up with this 4-meter column that is placed on top of the track as a spacer. I feel like this technique really worked out well. It made it pretty easy to build this semi-curved roof piece and make it line up nice and evenly, and I'm really happy with how it turned out in the end. So I did that for both sides, and then the sides of the tunnels were just expanded. Now here you can see how I used the terrain. So what I just did there was I went through and turned the terrain collision on, and then you could once terrain collision's on, you can easily pull all the terrain over it and it will leave a hole in the ground for the scenery pieces, but it leaves a big gap on the side. So then what I did, I went through and turned terrain collision off again, and really carefully went in with the terrain tools and slowly pulled the terrain closer to the edges without letting the terrain clip through the scenery. It took a little bit of finessing, but it ended up working out pretty well. I did have to expand, you see in a second here, expand the concrete a little bit to cover up those gaps, because if you pull it too close it starts to clip through into the tunnel, and it really didn't want that to be seen as the coaster is going through. But overall it was a pretty simple process, and I use a similar process for all 3 of these in-ground elements that you see here in the park now. Now the other 2 concrete elements were made in the same fashion of using all the concrete pillars and just generally building them. Like the splashdown element, I built it up in the air so it was easier to deal with, and then I sunk it down like once I figured out how big it had to be. So I built the floor, and then I lifted it up and built all the walls around it, and then I sunk it back down into the ground. That way I wasn't dealing with all the terrain in the way and all that stuff. And once again, I took the terrain tools and pushed all the dirt away from the area until I had it positioned, and then used the terrain tool with a fine brush to get it really close to the edge. And just like the other ones, it has to be this actually ended up being 4 almost in some parts, 3 or 4 concrete columns wide to cover up all the holes in the terrain. Then the last element that I built in the ground here is kind of this dip into the ground where after the coaster does the dive loop. And I'm not super happy with how this turned out. Like in my head, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, and I really didn't want to change the track at all at this point. But it dipped down a little lower than I had anticipated, because they do this in real life where they'll have the coaster come really, really close to the ground, and they'll dig out maybe a foot or 2 and lay some concrete slab down, and that gives it a solid foundation to put footings and stuff like that. But usually it's not this deep, and it was too small to put a tunnel, but not quite. I don't know. It just kind of turned out funny. But I'm on the fence about it. But it's probably gonna stay the way it is. It's just gonna be kind of hard to do some of the coaster supporting, which, as you can see, I've taken off all the coaster supports at this point. At the time of recording this video and while I was working on all this, the Planet Coaster 1.7 update came out, so now we have all the in-game coaster support pieces. And I started off, once I started playing the game after that update downloaded, I deleted all the coaster supports because I was initially gonna... I really needed to figure out how I wanted to support it. I'm still probably gonna do a combination of in-game supports, as in the generic track supports, and then building some custom supports. I just haven't decided yet. There are going to be some tricky elements to do. Like I said, this dive loop, because of this concrete footer down here, is going to be kind of hard to support, I think, like on this side of the loop. And also the big Immelman loop that goes over the station is going to be kind of tricky to support. At least support realistically. I mean, obviously it doesn't need to be supported in the game, but I want to make sure there's enough support that could look realistic, but I don't want, like, in real life, this is obviously under-supported, but I'm pretty sure that it would not be a good idea to support the coaster off of the structure from the building. So I'm going to have to figure out a way, some kind of like angled overhangs to support it up to this point, and then support it over here, down here, or something like that. So that's going to be the next episode. Hopefully, I'm hoping to finish up this coaster in one more episode, doing all the final detailing, like the coaster supports, and then finishing up the inside of the coaster station, or the coaster building, I guess you'd call it, and then finishing up the queue. This queue isn't finalized. I know it's not finalized. I haven't decided which way I want to put this staircase, but I do want the queue to kind of go out, maybe into this area, and have a couple more switchback spots with like an overhang that matches the wood over here, and then either go alongside this dive down tunnel or go around the dive underneath this maintenance shed or something like that, and then back up to the stairs. So I'm going to build a small, like just a small overhang, kind of wooden scaffolding overhang over here, and then I'm also going to put some more covers like over this staircase, because obviously having a hole in your ceiling is not usually a good thing. So we're going to put some kind of cover over the staircase that's going to match the wood kind of building style that the station is done with. And then maybe some foliage up front and stuff like that. I'm going to build some more big paths out front for guests, and then also bring that path over to the splashdown area so people could, you know, in real life take pictures and go over there and watch it and all that cool stuff. And yeah, so that's going to be it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed kind of getting a peek into what I've been dealing with on this build, and I will see you in the next episode.